welcome. If you've made it to the 9 a.m. on day 3 of a conference, you are winning. So well done for being here. We are being filmed from the back. I think you're safe out there. You are not being filmed, but we are. So keep it clean. So yeah, let's kick off. Look, the point of this morning, at the Centre for Social Justice, in all the work we do, there is just a couple of things that come back really, really clearly. And one of those is that there is nothing quite like having a job. It is at the most basic level. It gives you income. It is a route out of poverty. It is a way to support your family. But there is actually more to that as well. It is about dignity and it is about identity. It is purpose. It is a reason to get up in the morning and give back to society. And we are a big country. I think whatever problems we have, we are still one of the largest economies in the world. We have a sort of robust and fluid labour market. We have stable tables at the back.
Strong and stable.
Strong and stable tables. We have a great record on sort of progressive policy and inclusion, but there is this huge persisting gap in employment between disabled and non-disabled people. I mean, I joined the CSJ 5 years ago. It was one of the first things we worked on, and I think it's fair to say things have happened, but not much. So you've still got the situation now where about just over 50% of disabled people are in employment compared to over 80, or at least it was. Obviously notwithstanding all the shenanigans of recent goings on, but about 80% of non-disabled people. So it'll be about 40 years at current pace to close that gap. So there is much to be done. We had the government strategy recently. There are other things going on, I know, in the DWP. Great to have Chloe here, who's going to talk a bit about her new brief there. But we want to really focus a bit today on that employment side, and not just getting into work, but once you're in work, how do we keep you in work? What needs to happen there? So I will let the panellists largely introduce themselves, but just very briefly. Great to have from Scope, James Taylor and Richard Luke on the ends there, who have helped us put this together, so thank you to them. It's brilliant to have Paulette Cohen from Barclays, who I was just saying earlier, Barclays is a name that comes up quite a lot in this space, so we were pleased to have Barclays on this panel. And to have Chloe Smith, who is brand new in her brief at DWP, so great to have her here to kick things off. So it's going to be normal rules apply. We're going to have sort of opening comments from each of our panellists, but then we want to get all you involved. We want to get the online audience involved as well. I've got a clever gizmo here where if there are questions coming in from online, I can see them, so do send us in questions. Brilliant. Let's kick off. And I'd like to kick off, if we can, with James.
Yeah. Good morning, everybody. And thank you to Ed and CSJ for putting this event on, and thank you to the Minister as well for joining us. I'm from Scope, the National Disability Charity, and we campaign for the rights of Britain's 14 million disabled people at home, at school and in work. And I think today's discussion comes at a really important time. We know that the pandemic, COVID-19, has had a huge and largely negative impact on disabled people and disabled families over the last 18 months in terms of the levels of poverty, the levels of employment, people's healthcare, access to basics like shopping, other food and essentials, accessing healthcare as well. And we think there's a huge opportunity now to think about how we support disabled people in society as government begins to build back and level up from the effects of COVID-19. In terms of employment, we have seen the disability employment gap increase from 28% to around 29%, so it has gone up slightly, and I think we expect that to go up a bit more as furlough comes to an end. And it's really important we start to think about how we support disabled people back into work for those who can work. I think the recent National Disability Strategy, which isn't quite as big as the CSJ document, actually, interesting, is a helpful starting place for the conversation today. At Scope, we welcomed lots of the positive commitments in the strategy, not least those that are aimed at supporting disabled people to get into work, and I think crucially, which we might talk about a bit later in the panel, staying in work too. That's one of the biggest issues around the employment gap, being stuck at around 30 percentage points. And at Scope, we're keen and we're ready to work with the Minister and other ministers across government on the delivery of the commitments in the strategy to ensure we get the details right and that they make a difference to the everyday lives of disabled people, families with disabled children too. But there's always room to go further. There always will be room to go further. And we at Scope really want to work with businesses and government to make that happen. And I think critically put disabled people and people with lived experience at the heart of decisions that impact upon them, at the the heart of decision making. Co-producing with disabled people is something we want to see happen a lot more of. And whilst the pandemic has had a hugely negative impact on lots of people, there have been some positives, particularly around flexible working for disabled people, something that lots of disabled people have asked for a long time. Employers have flatly refused, we've heard. And I think what we've seen is a lot more openness from businesses, from employers up and down the country to recognise the value of flexible working, of working remotely. And this has had benefits for lots of disabled people too. And I think we would urge both government and businesses to think about how we can keep lots of these processes, lots of these practices in place about letting people work where they want and where they do their best work in place, because that benefits lots of people for whom travelling to the office might not be appropriate. I think there's also a really big prize on offer if we get this right. Work that Scope did back in March found that if we were to halve the disability employment gap, which is about getting 1.2 million more disabled people in work and keeping them in work, we would boost UK output by around 50 billion a year, and it would mean an extra 17 billion pounds in the government, in the Treasury's coffers a year. So there's a huge financial incentive to get this right, to halve the disability employment gap. And so we think this should act as a huge motivation, but it's far from the only thing that should motivate us. The policy aim of halving the gap is actually about changing the lives of disabled people up and down this country, and it's about ensuring that any disabled person who wants to work has the chance to do so in a job and a career that's fulfilling and rewarding to them. So that's why, that's what we at Scope continue to strive for, what we're really keen to discuss today. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, James. Actually, I'm going to come to Richard, but before I do, can I just follow up quickly on that flexible working thing? I think one of our principles here is multiply what works. How is it, do you know how it's going now as people are going back to work? Are you seeing people being forced back? Are people being able to stay flexible? What's that looking like?
In some cases, yes. I'm proud to say at Scope we have a fully flexible working policy. We let people work where they want, where they feel they can do their best work. I know lots of employers are doing that too, and are recognising that actually travelling to the office is exhausting. And I think for people with fluctuating conditions in particular, the office isn't always the best place to do your work, and not always the best place where you can do your work.
Thank you. Brilliant. Thank you, James. Richard, over to you.
Okay. Hi, I'm Richard. I'm here as a storyteller today, but I am the Information Officer for Cerebral Palsy for Scope. I live with quadriplegic cerebral palsy myself, so I want to share a little bit of my lived experience with you. I worked for most of my life. However, it was clear to me that the path wouldn't be easy in sixth form. I was often excluded in careers advice sessions due to the career staff not knowing exactly what options there were there for me. Finding an employment, meaningful employment, was tough and at times demoralising. I quickly discovered that if I did not declare my disability on an application form, I would get an interview. So the problem clearly wasn't my experience or skill set. That was the easy part in retrospect. I can remember attending one particular interview and entering the waiting room full of other nervous prospective candidates. I gave my name to the reception and took my place to wait to be interviewed. Within minutes, a person entered the waiting area and told me the job had gone. This was clearly not the case, as I asked the person sitting adjacent to me what job they had come for. I had to leave. What else could I do in that moment that wouldn't have increased my sense of humiliation? Once in work, I found that I had to work longer and harder than my non-disabled colleagues to be seen as having equal worth and prove the employer was right to take a chance on me, a phrase that I was told by many employers at the time of being offered a job. I was also limited to where I could work in terms of distance from my home because of the cost of taxi cabs and being unsure at the time whether the public transport would be accessible or even stop for me. I held jobs where, after taking out the cost of transport, I was working for around £2 an hour. But I wanted to work. I wanted to have all the non-financial benefits of being in work: independence, positive self-image and a sense of purpose. I believe that many companies and businesses are open to employing disabled people, but they are reluctant because of the perceived extra costs. Like me, until the age of 34, most businesses don't know about the Access to Work scheme and how it can help the employer and employee alike. Although it can be less than perfect, sometimes claims are processed slowly or receipts are lost. The scheme can help with transport costs or the provision of additional equipment with little or no cost to the employer. The employee is then left to get on with the job they were hired to do. But nobody can make use of a scheme that they don't know exists. Disabled people don't want gestures. We want to contribute. We want to get on in life. And the developments in technology due to the pandemic that have allowed non-disabled people to work from home has also allowed disabled people to manage their conditions more effectively, meaning they're not running on empty. It's allowed disabled people to remain productive and stay in work while dealing with what might be fluctuating conditions or impairments. There is potential to open the world of work to a new generation of highly educated, talented and motivated disabled people, which can only be a benefit to the economy, to business and to the individual. Let's not turn the clock back.
Brilliant. Thank you, Richard. I wonder if I can just pick up before coming to Paulette. We heard there from James about how the last year has been a very difficult one, and we actually don't hear much about disabled people within it on the news and things. I wonder sort of your experience of the last year and what you're hearing as well.
Through my daily work with Scope, the sense of isolation and loneliness has increased tenfold. Obviously, with people being advised to maybe shield or not to shield. It's just a sense that I think there's a lot of people that just feel really lonely, unsure what direction to go in, unsure whether they're going to have work to go back to, how is it going to look when things do go back to a normal. Is everything going to change back to the way it was before? So there's a lot of uncertainty within the community for sure.
Brilliant. Thank you. Paulette, yeah, we heard there about employers not always knowing what's available and things.
Yeah.
You're an employer, 40,000 people you were telling me in the UK alone, 90,000 worldwide. Let's hear from you.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you so much for this opportunity to join you today. I think it's extraordinary that we've heard from Richard and James so far, and I'd scribbled some notes before this morning, and my notes mirror a lot of what you've both said already. So we haven't compared notes, and apologies if I'm sound like I'm picking up on stuff directly. I'm Paulette, I'm the Head of Diversity and Inclusion for Barclays in the UK. And for the past 5 years, I've had the real privilege of focusing on what we would call the disability agenda at Barclays. We have 5 diversity and inclusion agendas, and disability is one of those. I have to say, one of the things that I'm absolutely determined to ensure is that disability is not the 5th agenda. And I have heard that sometimes, but I can guarantee that at Barclays it's not. So one of the things that we've particularly focused on is employment opportunities for people with disabilities, mental health conditions, or neurodiverse conditions. That sense of disability inclusion is something that's really embedded in the business. There are 2 principles that I think businesses can consider when they're looking at the concept of levelling employment opportunities. And I'd scribbled those down. And I think these 2, if businesses start to look at things in this way, can help to move the dial. And the first relates exactly to what Richard's just said, and that's recognising that all abilities count. For us, it's about really looking at the talent, the skills that people bring, making sure that you're not judging people by their disability, should they choose to share that with you, and really looking at the skills that they bring to the business. Both their professional skills, but also We listen a lot to our disabled community. The other skills that are often really needed in business but not necessarily recognised. So things like resilience, innovation, working out different ways to do things, adaptability and flexibility, and also real collaboration skills. All of these are great for business. So first principle, making sure that people with all abilities count. And the second is about future-proofing opportunities. Now, what I mean by that is not retrofitting what you're doing to accommodate disabled employees, but actually preparing for that from the start. Now, I'm very proud to be on a panel like this and to talk about the Barclays experience, but I will be the first to say that we haven't got it right. I don't believe any business can. I will share some of the positive things we've done, but this sense of future-proofing is definitely something that we're working on at the moment. Excuse me, but I really urge businesses to look at narrowing the employment gap by preparing the way that they work to make sure that they can accommodate people of all abilities. Now, I've just got three very brief examples of things that we've done. So firstly, we've adapted the way we recruit and hire for some of our jobs. We've developed a bespoke apprenticeship and internships called Able to Enable, which previously was targeted at all elements of disability, neurodiverse conditions, mental health conditions, with bespoke assessment centres, very different from how one would normally recruit, to make sure that you've got a level playing field. And I think this is about equity and not just equality of opportunity. And recently, we've really ramped that up in our technology centres in Glasgow, in Cheshire, where we've expanded this for people who are on the autistic spectrum. We need really good tech people. A lot of people on the spectrum have phenomenal skills that but don't feel they have the opportunity. So we're really trying to open up the opportunity there. The second thing is about retaining people in employment. That sense of progression, people talked about fulfilling work. I think that's really important. People want to know that they're progressing in their career and not just being given a job. We listen to our colleagues from the disabled community. We have a network, it's called REACH, and we've developed a mentoring program. And some of you may have heard of things called reverse mentoring, but it really does work like that. So we're pairing colleagues who want to progress in their career, who identify as having a disability or health condition, with someone senior in the organisation, and it works both ways. We're seeing real progression of our colleagues going through the grades, but more significantly, we're also seeing really improved understanding and awareness from our other colleagues, and I think that's really important. And then the final thing, I think Richard has really captured that beautifully. It's that concept of storytelling. It's really sharing the lived experience. And we initiated something called This Is Me a few years ago, which is all built around colleagues sharing their stories, their personal experiences, challenging the stigma, but also dispelling the myths. So actually flexible working, which we've done way before the pandemic, is not an expensive adjustment to make, and yet it can make the world of difference. So you can really dispel the myths, share stories, challenge the stigma, and we've seen This Is Me take off in a number of other companies. So I think those are three things that we have tangibly done. Having said that, I could write as long a list of the things that we've still got to do as well.
Before I come to you, Chloe, one question on those things you mentioned there. It's really interesting. We talked quite a bit about getting into work and then being retained in work, but you talked there about progression, and that is a matter of equity. And I just wondered, within Barclays, how has that worked?
The mentoring program, we've seen a real uptick of people who have benefited from that. A lot of feeling that you want to progress is about two things. One, it's about confidence to do that. So mentoring can really support you to get the confidence to move forward. And the second thing is adjustment. So a colleague of mine who wanted to progress was a bit nervous about going for a more senior role and going through the interview process. She was encouraged through her mentor to be really upfront with the interview team. She got to see the questions in advance. She could prepare. She could be the very best person that she could be when she went for the interview. She got the job, was promoted. So I think it's a combination of both of those.
Brilliant. Thank you. Chloe, you're about 2 weeks into a new job.
Thank you. I am, and what better place to be at the beginning of that journey than here with you. So many thanks for putting this event on and for all the work that you have done on disability over time. And it's excellent to be with the other panellists this morning, so thank you for what you've already said. So just a sort of in a sentence about me, I'm now the Minister for Disability, Health and Work. I've been very fortunate to have experience of a number of other ministerial roles for around a decade, so I'm looking forward to bringing that to bear, if I can, on the enormous challenges in this brief, which are also quite personal to me, because, amongst other things, I saw a close member of my family fall out of the workplace, out of a job that he loved, because of an increasing disability. So I've seen firsthand how that felt and what that meant for a person. And indeed, I've a little experience of employing a person with disability as well. And perhaps most prominently in my own life, here I am with a Macmillan Cancer Support pen, but some may know that I've had breast cancer in the last year and come through that. But therefore an insight into what it means to be able to contemplate work and the other things you want to do in your life alongside a major health condition. So all of these things are, I hope, helpful as I approach the importance of the issues that are here in this brief. In addition to that, actually, I think it's very valuable for all members of Parliament to be able to reflect on the kind of issues we see every day in our constituency work. These are the issues for which we came into this role, for which we want to make a difference in public service. And I know that's also true for all of us here on this panel and most of us attending a conference. Why are we in politics if we don't want to make a difference like that? And for me, I ran a scheme called Norwich for Jobs in my constituency, which was all about getting young people into work, and most recently we focused that on young people with disabilities and health conditions. And so the chance to be able to then do that nationally is very special to me as well. So let me just cover a couple of points of sort of policy and the position of the government, if you like, and then really looking forward to getting into discussion. The first thing to say is how absolutely committed both I personally and the government are to making sure that we can improve the lives of disabled people. We have the opportunity, I think, for some ambitious reform. Many of you will have seen the National Disability Strategy, but also a green paper that we published in July, and I'll come on to that in a moment. But let's start with the basics. 1 in 5 people in this country identify as having a disability. So that isn't actually, some form of niche issue, is it? This is mainstream. This is where we need to be having a discussion about what does economic recovery mean for our entire country, with the understanding that 1 in 5 of us would identify that way. So we have to do everything we can to help disabled people to find jobs for those who can and wish to work, to facilitate more independent living for disabled people, and to ensure also that the disability benefit system works effectively, is sustainable in its own right. I think the benefits of reducing the disability employment gap are absolutely clear and have been really well illustrated by others on the panel. I think it's clear to see that there are enormous benefits for the employer, critically for the employee. I think the points you make, Ed, as well about dignity and about wanting to be able to be part of society. And Richard, you've illustrated this superbly. So thank you for telling the story that way. And of course also, those of us, as I say, in government and public service can see benefit there as well to the society that we all form together if we can achieve that goal. So just turning to the arithmetic of this, if you like, we estimated that we would be able to aspire to see 1 million more disabled people in work by 2027. So that was a 10-year goal that we set out in 2017. We see that in the first 4 years of that goal, the number of disabled people in employment has increased by 850,000. There's good progress. We believe that means that the disability employment gap has closed by around 5 percentage points since 2013. But there is so much more to do, and I take James's points about how we engage with the sheer maths of this question. It's what you have to do with a quantitative goal, isn't it? But the point is, every single one of those numbers is a person, and actually that's what we all want to work together to do. And there is so much more to do, so I really welcome Paulette's illustration of how this can be done. Particularly in a large firm, you give excellent examples from the perspective of a large corporate firm. It will be just as important to get into that really broad base of small firms in this country to be able to help them to see things in the same way and act also. So this is a major focus for me. As you will all know, the government support that goes hand in hand with this includes all of the offer that is made through Job Centre Plus, the work of the work coaches and the specialist disability employment advisors, the employment programmes like the Work and Health programme and Intensive Personalised Employment Support programme, which we call IPES for short, but also the individualised support. And I was really pleased to hear Richard mention access to work, although I absolutely acknowledge as well the point you make about ignorance of that and how do we overcome that. I think that's critical. And if I may say, it comes up in every conversation, actually, so you're absolutely on the money there. Disability confident, the Disability Confidence Scheme, I think, is also something here. It's a vehicle that we can use to spread that knowledge, but again, more needs to be done, because how do you get to the people who don't yet know? That is the crux of that question. There's also quite a lot to do, and I want to carry on doing with, if you like, the intersection between what my department can do and what the NHS can do. There is absolutely a critical point to be made here about the way that we should regard health and disability and good health and ability in the same conversation. That also drove what we published in a further paper that we published in July, which was entitled "Health is Everybody's Business," which is to focus on how we can prevent people from leaving work, from falling out of work due to ill health. And indeed, Richard, as we were discussing just before the panel began, getting people into work is one thing, preventing people from falling out of work is just as powerful a tool, and is something we ought to talk very seriously about. So there's a lot to be done to promote ongoing good health in the workplace, and that is also a major focus from me. I mentioned the third document published in July, which is the Health and Disability Support Green Paper. That is to explore how the welfare system can better meet the needs of disabled people and people with health conditions, both now and in the future, which is why I refer to this being a moment where we could embrace, I would hope, quite ambitious reform, and that's something that I'm really looking forward to discussing in this panel and beyond. All of these pieces of work, of course, are strongly influenced by the views of disabled people and the work that we can do with disabled people's organisations. And that's something that, again, I very much want to continue and therefore really welcome being with you today. Let me just touch in brief then on the National Disability Strategy, because this is where it goes broader, of course, than only the workplace. I'm delighted that we are talking about the workplace because I think it's a really major driver. But critically, we have to be able to look in the round at what a full role in society really means, don't we? It's not only the ability to be in work, but it's about areas of life that include jobs and housing and transport and education and shopping and culture and justice, and indeed many things that go beyond only public services. Let's also make that point. This is not only about what government can do, but goes beyond that as well, into how we can continue to change attitudes and promote a culture that is right and inclusive and driven by equality. Just coming up to date then with announcements at this conference. You obviously heard the Chancellor yesterday talk further about support for getting people back into work after the pandemic. My job, I regard, in government is to make sure that in every conversation about recovery after the pandemic, disability and health is central in it. You know, again, this point that this is not some sort of side concern. This has to be absolutely central, because it is absolutely central. And the other thing that I think is worth a thought in the kind of current political agenda, this phrase, this big idea of levelling up, which, by the way, I feel enormously passionate about, having grown up in rural Norfolk and seen what life is like when there aren't very many opportunities around you at all. We need to make sure that we're tackling regional disparities in opportunities for disabled people, and I think there really is a whole level to go into in terms of where disability employment is thriving and flourishing in this country, and some places where it's not. And what are the drivers of that, geographical or historical or social or economic, and how can we improve those? So I'll close there, Ed. I hope that's been helpful just as a sort of view across all that the government is doing, and really keen to listen to people's views this morning and take those on board in that work.
Brilliant. Thank you. I'm going to come to the audience in about a minute, but I'm going to use my chair's prerogative to ask questions. So be thinking of your questions, though. I want to pick up on the National Disability Strategy and that wider picture. I think Richard mentioned it as well, actually, that things like transport. If I want a job, I've got to get to work. You mentioned education, that sort of thing. This is a job that is going to have fingers right across government. You've got to be into transport, education, health, everywhere else. How does that look like from within DWP? Can you do that? Because that feels like government departments are siloed and hard. Yeah. How can you see that working?
Well, it's a great opportunity to crack some heads together, isn't it? Which is exactly what I'm seeking to do with it. And just in sort of structural terms, so apologies for a very government-focused answer to this question, but to reassure you that my role spans both the work within the Department for Work and Pensions, in other words, the benefits system and disability employment, but also goes across government to be able to do exactly this. So I am in charge of what we call the Disability Unit. That's run from the Cabinet Office, a department I know well. I've just come from experience there. But that means that sitting right next door to the Prime Minister, you have the right and the ability to crack the heads together. And that is what we'll be doing in order to deliver all the very many commitments in the National Disability Strategy.
Brilliant. Thank you. Great. If you have a question, raise a hand. I've got my little gizmo here in case there are any others. Start at the back. Yes, we've got microphones. If you can say who you are, where you're from, anything like that, Cilla Black style, and ask your question to the panel.
I just want to say a huge thank you to the panel. I'm Katie, I'm Chief Executive of Alzheimer's Society. So for me, dementia is so rarely seen as a disability. Less than 1 in 10 people with dementia see themselves or class themselves as disabled, and so often disability rights are not applied to them. And yet we know in the workforce people with disability face massive discrimination. So people with young onset often have an incredibly poor experience, and people that are older face a dual discrimination of both ageism and their dementia symptoms. So I'm just would like to welcome the Minister to her new role, but I'm really interested in understanding what the new strategy brings for people with dementia and other severe cognitive impairments. Thank you.
Should we start with you then, Chloe, and then if any others on the panel want to answer that as well?
Very happy to. And Kate, thank you. I look forward to working with you and perhaps meeting more fully to talk through the issues. I was going to drop by the stand, but I think that would be a poor substitute for a proper meeting where we should do that. I think you make a very good point, and it's certainly something that we want to focus upon. Your point, I think, particularly spans, as it were, people of working age and people who may be retired and not necessarily economically active. But that's kind of not the point, is it? It's that whatever the age, there are people who need support and need understanding and need structures to work for them. So we are focused on that through the disability strategy. I suppose the answer is very slightly different if we talk in terms of employment, but nonetheless, I think all the points we make today apply very closely to, as you say, cognitive impairments, and I'm grateful to you for illustrating that.
Brilliant. Anyone else on the panel on that one?
Yeah, I'd just like to say I think it's important with conditions like dementia that we empower and become allies of people to not feel ashamed to admit they've got a disability. Because until you take that step to say, yes, I'm a disabled person, as you rightly said, there are lots of things that are closed off to you in the world of work and in the benefit system as a whole, really. So it's about taking away that shame of saying, yes, I am a disabled person.
Brilliant, thank you. More questions? Yes. Chap in the third row, yeah.
Hi, my name's Ishmael. I work for MenCap. I also have a learning disability, but I like to see employers need to change attitudes, not judging by the person's disability and looking at what things they can do instead of having a roundtable interview, looking at more what skills that they can bring to the workplace. So I was employed by MenCap, where I was shown what skills I have instead of what grades I have. There was not interest in my grades. It was more about whether I'm able to do the job or not. And if I didn't, they will sort of train me up to develop those skills. And also, second thing, access to work side, there's not enough awareness by access to work. To go more forward to making sure people with learning disabilities or other disabilities have a career, getting a good job and start a career is more bringing more awareness about access to work, and also mainly is the discrimination and also changing attitudes on employers. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. I wonder actually, Paulette, can I put you on the spot on access to work? It's come up, I think, right across the panel, and it's sort of that people don't necessarily know about it, employees don't. In that multiply what works thing, how does it work at Barclays?
We do have colleagues that benefit from access to work, but in the words of everyone on the panel and indeed people in the audience, it is one of the best kept secrets. That's how I hear it described. So I think there is more that people need to understand about it. I think there's also some confusion and perhaps again some myths about how complex it is, how one goes about securing it. But having said that, where we do have colleagues who benefit from access to work, it is a wonderful resource and really helps them to have a very fulfilling career within the organisation. I can think of colleagues both with visual impairment and hearing impairment who've benefited from access to work. And yeah, it works very, very well. To the gentleman's questions about adapting the way one is hired, one of the things that we've done is really look at changing the way that we do carry out that interview process. You're right, really look at aptitude and ability. Obviously, we have criteria for the job roles that we are hiring for. But certainly the apprenticeship and the internship that I described, Able to Enable, was very much focused on not looking at a set list of questions. We actually deployed, we have something called life skills, which you can look up very easily. It's about helping young people get into work. But we adapted that process of life skills for the interview process. So it was much more talking to people and finding out what they, what aptitudes they brought, as opposed to a specific bespoke set of questions. And I don't think that's particularly difficult to do, but it does mean that you get really great talent coming into the business. So it's a great question, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else on either of those points?
I think both on Ishmael's question and Kate's questions, it comes down to attitudes, doesn't it, really? And I think there's still a conception or preconception in this country that a disabled person is someone in a wheelchair, and that's about it. And that's the sort of barrier and attitude towards disability and understanding of disability and disabled people that we need to challenge, both in the workplace and in society.
Brilliant. Let's come over this side. Yes, one and then two. Can we take two at a time, actually? We've got a few to get through.
Thanks very much. Hello, I'm Robert. I lead on assistive and accessible technology policy at the think tank Policy Connect, which I chatted yesterday. So you'll be able to predict where my question's going. We recently released a report, Talent and Technology, and also contributed to the Centre for Social Justice report. So, on how technology can really boost opportunity for disabled people. I use Access to Work myself and technology through that. But I'd be really interested to hear the panel's reflections on the role that technology can play, but just to make things a little bit harder for you outside of just Access to Work, because I think there's lots beyond that scheme as well to explore. So thank you.
Brilliant. We'll take a second question as well.
John Pring from Disability News Service. Can I ask the Minister how your understanding of the social model of disability will affect your work in this area?
Great. Thank you. Who wants to go first on either of those?
Shall I?
Yep, go for it.
Happy to. I'll take John's question first. I think the social model is an important component of our thinking here, and I'm sure we all agree that it expresses that people perhaps should not be seen as disabled in themselves, but that are held back by the world around them. And I very much agree with that school of thought, and the practical answer to it is that the National Disability Strategy and all the rest of the work we're doing goes broad and deep precisely to be able to meet those kind of challenges. Coming to Rob's point, Rob, we did indeed speak last night. There was a previous event that covered, in a welcome way, covered some similar points to this as well. And what I mentioned last night was that the disability unit is leading some work on assistive tech, and to take that therefore as a signal of how importantly we agree that that tech will be an enabler, is already obviously, and will continue to be an enabler for many people. There needs then to be, the conversation needs to be about how to grow that from the seeds at which it currently is, how to understand people's needs, how to support that flourishing in the market that will be needed there. And again, I'm really going to be sort of humble in the answer to that. The audience and the users of that tech will be the ones who have that wisdom far more than me or than the disability unit, which is why we need to work with people to be able to do that work. So that really is an open door and an open invitation to push that forward. If I may just give a practical example, actually, that is kind of current in legislative terms. There is a piece of legislation going through Parliament at the moment that seeks to ensure that people with any disability get the support that they need when they go to a polling station. You may know the law currently essentially offers that only to blind and partially sighted people, which has been a very important piece, of course, of the landscape, but it's not right that should only be focused in that way. So therefore the legislation broadens this out. Now, why does this come onto technology? Well, it does because what you would have to do in law to make this a reality is to say that returning officers, in other words, the people who run polling stations, must provide the support that is reasonable for a person who turns up to be able to vote. Very familiar language here, isn't it, in terms of reasonable adjustments and the things we all know about. But actually, how do we sort of take that foundation in law and run with it so that tech that people will already be using in many other areas of their lives to meet their own needs and choices, how do we ensure that could be perhaps brought to a polling station or brought to any other essential interaction, vital right, which is of course what voting is, and be made successful. So I hope that's a helpful illustration of some of the issues at hand there.
Brilliant, thank you. Just reflecting on the technology question, I mean, I'm a total Luddite and I always slightly fear this, but I noticed all of you have touched on it in some way, and what you're talking about flexible working and what's in age and that. You talked about preparing for jobs of the future as well. I just wondered if any of you guys had any reflections on that particular technology issue. Richard?
I just want to say that I think for me it's revolutionised the way that I work and my ability to be productive. And in reality, for a lot of disabled people, whether their condition is physical or neurological, sometimes getting to work is like doing a full shift before you've even got to the office, because you're not just dealing with the transport, you're dealing with people's attitudes as well. And sometimes people are not very nice. So you've got a choice. We either embrace this wonderful technology, we're on the verge of some outstanding innovations, we either embrace it and prepare for the future, or as an economy in the country, we get left behind, because technology just doesn't help disabled people, it helps us all, because we're all going to change, we're all going to get older, we might get health conditions, we want that there so we can continue to be who we are. So we shouldn't fear it, we should embrace it.
Brilliant. Paulette.
A great statement there, Richard, and you've just reminded me of something that one of my senior colleagues has said in the retail bank, actually, and that's a solution for one is a solution for many.
Yeah.
And a lot of the design work that we've done, the tech design work, has had extraordinary benefits. It was originally designed to embrace our disabled customers and provide a better service, but actually we find that it provides a better service for everyone, and people really value that. The other thing that I did want to say, I touched on it before, is we're fortunate that we have an accessible technology unit, so everything that we try and do, particularly from a customer base but also from a colleague base, goes through that accessibility lens, and that's where we look at some of the assistive technology work. I think designing at the start for accessibility is key, as opposed to retrofitting it, and I steal that phrase with pride. It's not one of mine but one of my colleagues. We don't always get it right, I'll be the first to say that, but very interesting, over the past year we've really seen that technology support a lot of our customers who have disabilities and health conditions, because being able to use technology to be able to bank, to be able to stay connected has been so important. But it is about future-proofing as opposed to retrofitting.
And
Great question.
If I could just add to that as well, customers are going to start making choices by who has the technology, who is more accessible, who is more open to change. So companies need to realise this, because we've got a generation of disabled people that are leaving university and school who are very savvy. They've lived in the cyber world far more than I have. And if they don't like what you're doing, they'll go somewhere else. And disabled people have expendable income.
Yes, correct.
So let's remember that.
Great. We're quite tight on time, and I am going to ask our panellists to wrap up in a moment. We've got time for one more question. Yeah. Over here.
Hi, my name's Jamila, and I'm from NCAP, but I'm speaking in a personal capacity. My friend, I just want to touch on what Richard says about going into work sometimes is a shift in itself. My friend has had issues with accessibility with the lifts in Weybridge, and getting to work sometimes is not possible, and having to get a taxi is the only option. And I just wondered, with the National Disability Strategy, or the unit in the Cabinet Office, what is the scope of work with the Rail Minister, for example, and because the issue is money for lifts and accessibility on platforms. The attitudes with rail guards as well is their training, because half the time when my friend does get to the platform, he has to miss the train because the rail guards, their attitude towards disabled people is frankly disgusting. Half the time they sort of see disabled people as an inconvenience, or it's not my problem, mate, find someone else on the platform. And I just wonder, the training, where is the money, what is going in to actually help people get into work? Because I think the other issue is then people with disability feel like they don't want to be that burden to their employer as well. So they don't want to sort of highlight access to work, because a lot of the burden falls on disabled people to sort of fill in the forms and get the whole thing kicking down the road. So what is actually being done to sort of support disabled people?
Feels like one for you, Chloe.
A very good pair of points, and the point, let's start with the access to work one. This is very much in my mind, actually, because it connects to the question of how do you reach out to the employers who don't already know about it. Now, one answer to that might be, well, you ask the prospective employee or the applicant to be the one kind of carrying that information. But does that place too much of a burden on their shoulders in the way that you've just illustrated? So these are points I'm really grappling with and want to get right. So I'm grateful for the illustration of that there. On transport points, I'm just going to sort of direct people to the strategy. It works through department by department, and again I apologise that that's a slightly government-focused answer, but it is relevant to how you ask the question. The document also very carefully goes beyond only public services and into the cultural space, and as you say, the culture of what you get back from a railway station employee is just as important as what the underpinning law or sort of fundamentals of public service are. And so the commitments here are to enable disabled people to travel with confidence, and that comprises lots of points around staff training, around information, around attitudes and behaviours. There are concrete things that need to be done around accessibility and safety, not only in terms of rail, but also actually going into other modes of transport as well, obviously. There is some points, and I hesitate to say this considering the week of news that is generally going on around shortages of drivers, but there is actually a specific point in here as well around the need to make sure there are enough community transport drivers. That's perhaps a subset, isn't it, of the broader drivers conversation. And I think there's... furthermore, there's a kind of real future point in here as well, which is around green transport. How do we enable... it brings together the tech points, it brings together the future-proofing points that Paulette's been making very cogently. How do we not just do what's needed for kind of the transport of today, but actually make this right for what's needed in the future? But I thank you for the illustration you give on behalf of your friend, because it goes to the heart of the things we've got to do.
Brilliant, thank you. We have just a few minutes left, so I'm going to let the panel respond to anything they fancy that's come up at all. You've got about 30 seconds each if there's anything you want to pick up on. James, I'm going to throw you under the bus first.
An accessible bus.
Yeah, an accessible bus.
Nothing to pick up on. I think we've heard that disabled people in this country make up a huge part of the population, 1 in 5. And I think if the government is serious about levelling up, we have to involve those people in what levelling up means, whether that's co-producing, co-designing technology, solutions for transport, working with employers on how we get disabled people in work and crucially keep them in work. And I think it also means investing in disabled people and disabled families too, whether that's across transport, in employment, a whole host of other areas. So I think there's a huge opportunity. We've heard, and I've talked about the benefits of employing disabled people, both on their own lives, but also benefits to the economy and to the exchequer. And I think what we need to do now is realise those benefits.
Brilliant, thank you. Richard.
I'm not going to respond to a specific point. I just want to say that disabled people are nature's problem solvers, because we live in a world that's not designed for us. And to ignore that is going to be a sad detriment to our economy and the country and the disabled people and their potential. So we must be able to find a suitable solution if we all work together.
Brilliant, thank you. Paulette.
Great discussion. We haven't mentioned resources that are available around at the moment, and I'm thinking of all the resources that something like the Business Disability Forum have, or Disability Confident. They're all sitting there waiting to be tapped, and I think there's an awareness piece around some of those resources. But secondly, from a business perspective, this is absolutely the right thing to do. But more than that, that there's a really strong business case for employing disabled people. I think Richard's put it really, really well. The majority of people acquire their disability whilst they're in work. It is crazy to lose that talent. It is crazy not to bring that talent into the organisation, and you don't understand your customer base if you don't. So it is not just a side issue. This is about really great business sense.
Chloe.
Well, thank you very much, and enormous thanks to everyone for all the points you've made. I don't think there's a point of substance to add to what's already been brought out actually in the discussion today, so thank you for that. Can I end in just a plug actually? If anybody hasn't gone to see the Ability to Win stand, one line that we haven't discussed today, but that is important, is that people with disabilities and health conditions ought also to be able to participate in politics. Here we are at a political conference, so the Conservative Party has a scheme that is about supporting people to stand so that they can be part of the change and driving the change. We shouldn't be doing this on behalf of disabled people. This should be co-produced in that best possible way, which includes politics itself. So please go and have a look at that, because that is just as important.
Brilliant. Thank you, and thank you. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you guys from Scope for coming, helping put this on. Thank you, Barclays, for being here and for what you're doing. And thank you and good luck early in the job. Just a bit of if you've got one of these on your chair, see what we're doing for the rest of the day. And we've got quite a broad range of things going on: skills, financial health, lost children, lockdown. Immediately after this, we've got one on rough sleeping. So we've got Robert Jenrick, who's just come from being the Secretary of State responsible for this, so it should be interesting to see what he's got to say about that. But we've also got Danny Kruger, who's just joined the department, formerly known as Housing, Local Government Communities, and now known as something else, which I can never quite keep up. So we'll have a good panel there. The guys from Crisis are coming as well to talk about their experience of what's gone on over the last 18 months. Thank you for coming. Thank you for your questions. Thank you to the panellists. See you around.
Thank you.